Morning, everyone. Hey, it is, as a church, it's our vision to connect people to Jesus and love our community. And we did an awesome job last week out at the fairgrounds. If you were there, we had a blast, and it was perfect weather, wasn't it? Yeah, we had fun. And now this week, if you didn't know, this week's VBS here, and so we don't normally have the seaweed up the aisle. It's just a new thing we're starting. But this week is VBS, and so it is our goal to do the same, to connect kids in our community and families to Jesus and just love on them. If this is your first time here, we're glad you're here. We're excited that you're here to worship with us. A couple weeks ago, we started this new series called Timeless. Looking at timeless truths of God from years and years and years ago that we more commonly know as the Ten Commandments. Something that God brought to this earth to bring rule, to bring order, but so much more than that. You see, the Ten Commandments, they have lasted the test of time. The Ten Commandments shape much of the world that we live in. They shape the society that we live in. And they're not just this list of rules and regulations. And they're not just this do's and don'ts. But really, they are a pathway that God gives us for a better life. I mean, they're designed by Him. And from them, we see principles that lead to personal health and community and order and security. I mean, these top 10, if you will, they don't just shape a whole bunch of years ago. They still shape today. I mean, these timeless truths, they've not gone away. There's no place in history where now murder's okay, right? It's still there. Don't murder. I mean, it's still a thing. And so these continue to teach us. They continue to be God's instruction, timeless truths that have not gone away. The first week we talked about that we are to have no other gods besides our God. No other gods. There's no one else that should take that place or nothing else. And Kurt talked to us about some of the different idols that maybe we put in that place and that Christ is supposed to fully engulf our life. Not just be a part of it, not just be a scheduled section, but to fully overtake what our lives look like. Last week out at the fairgrounds, we jumped ahead a little bit. And we talked about the family. And we talked about how we're supposed to honor our father and mother. And that's not just a command to little kids, that it's for all of us. No matter how old we are, there still should be kind of that family honor that takes place. And today, we're going to continue to work through these. Hey, here's what I need you to do. Okay, probably you know the person next to you. Maybe you don't, but you're about to meet them. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to look to that person next to you, even if you know them. Okay, we're all going to participate. And I need you to look at them and say, "Hi, my name is," and then tell them your name. Ready? Go. Okay. Good. Now that we are all fully acquainted, hopefully that's not the first time you talk to your spouse today. But now that we are fully engaged, you see, there is identity in a name. There's power that's in a name. We sang about that. There's power that is in a name. There's identity that is shaped within the name. Hey, you are known by your name, and from that name, then others know qualities about you based off of that name. You see, the name of God is no different. The name of God holds power and holds characters and qualities that far supersede who we are and what our identity looks like. But from the name of God, we learn the identity and who God really is. I want to pray and we're going to jump in. God, I'm so thankful for this morning. I'm thankful for our time of worship and celebration, God, of giving. God, I'm thankful for this time of learning. And Lord, I pray that as we learn together, as we study together, now these words that you communicated so many years ago that still stand as a guiding principles and a guiding light for our life today. I pray that you not just teach us words, but God, I pray this morning that you will lead our hearts, that your voice will be the loudest in the room. God, I'm thankful for this church, and I'm thankful that because of Jesus, we as a church can meet here as imperfect people. As people who made mistakes this past week. People who carried heavy burdens into this room. God, we can find hope in you. Jesus, we love you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. If you're willing, I need your help just a little bit more. Okay? If you're willing, I'm not going to make you. Okay, you make the choice. I brought with me some words. Okay, they're not hard words. They're real easy. It's not National Spelling Bee here this morning. I brought with me some words that I would like, if you're willing, for us to read out loud together. Okay, and here in a second, they're going to come on. One of them is going to come on the screen, and whenever the word comes on the screen, okay, then if you choose, you're going to read it out loud. Okay, sound pretty simple? All right, ready? We're going to go with the first one. Okay, all right, that was a good warm-up. Okay, next one. Okay, next. Next. Okay. Yep. Okay, good. All right. You had a choice to participate in that, right? Yes. Okay, good. Okay, yeah, 2 people recognize that. Good. You had a choice to participate in that. Okay, I didn't make you. I asked if you're willing to, okay, if you read the words on the screen. You had a choice on whether or not to communicate those words. You and I, we wake up every morning and we're faced with a choice, how we're going to use our words. And probably, if you're like me, you know what I did not think of this morning? I did not wake up and say, I wonder what my first word's going to be today. Like you just woke up and maybe it was, wake up, get out of bed. Maybe those were your first words, okay? All right, maybe it was something else. We don't often think of the words that we're using, but every day we're faced with a choice of how we're going to use our words. And we're faced with this choice. Either we'll use our words to build the character of God up or tear others down. You see, when it comes to our words, we're faced with this choice, which is why God, when he is giving these 10 commandments out, he makes sure to get in there something that has to do with our words. You see, he knew the power that was going to be in our words. He knew the depth of our words and the weight that they hold. There's some of us, we can remember words from years ago that scarred us or hurt us. He knew the weight of the words that we were going to use. I mean, the Bible teaches that out of the overflow of what? The heart, the mouth speaks. And so many times the words that we say are just kind of the echoes of our heart. And they either can build up the character of God or they can tear others down. And more than our words, more than the power that's in our words, God knew. He knew the power that was in his name. He knew the power that was in his name, and the way that we use his name and the power that we recognize within his name, it either builds his character up for others around us or it tears them down. If you brought a Bible this morning, we're going to be in Exodus chapter 20. That's where our next commandment is. Exodus chapter 20. You don't have to read this one out loud. I got this one. Okay. Exodus chapter 20, verse 7 says this. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Maybe some of you, like myself, you learned growing up, don't take the Lord's name in vain. Right? It's the same one. Okay? And I know for myself growing up, it was, you learn, don't take the Lord's name in vain. Okay, and so pretty much I was taught, don't use God's name unless you're talking to him or about him. Okay? Otherwise, don't do it. But when you begin to study and when you begin to kind of shake down exactly what God is communicating, there is more depth to this commandment other than just don't say God's name in a bad way. You see, God is not just after our reaction when we smash our thumb with a hammer or step on a Lego or describe our frustration with the heat outside. God's after more than that. God is asking, better yet, commanding. God is commanding us not to use his name for any other reason than to build up his character. And in no way should we use God's name just to benefit us. You see, God desires for our words to speak up to him and not down to others. He desires for our words to build up his character and not tear others down. You see, there's power in the name of God. In the Old Testament, okay, we read that God's name is Yahweh, Yahweh God. Okay, and in the Old Testament, there was, in society, oftentimes, you didn't even vocalize God's name. You didn't even say Yahweh out loud. Because you understood who you were. You understood what you've done and what you thought about and what you've already said. You understood the actions that you have done. And so because you know you and because you know what you've done, there is no place for me to utter out loud God's name because I know who I am. And so many times they didn't even say Yahweh God out loud because it just did not match up with who they are and how far we've come, haven't we? From a fear and a tremble of even vocalizing the name to now using it to describe our human emotion in just a small fit of rage. We've sadly forgotten about the power of the name of God. But here's the thing. That even people, I mean, if you think about it, even people that don't associate with church and don't claim Jesus, okay, they still recognize Jesus' name as the top. Illustrate it this way. You know what I've not heard? Okay, and I don't golf very often, okay? But when I've been golfing, and I golf with people that typically aren't very good at golfing, okay? Because I'm not very good at golfing, okay? But in all of those times with a bunch of people that's not very good at golfing, you know what I've never heard? I have never heard someone tee off and shank a shot all the way to the right and them yell, Buddha! I've not heard that one. I've not heard that. I have, over the past couple weeks, it's been, incredibly hot. You know what I have not heard through all of these high temperatures? I have not heard anybody say, Allah, it is hot out here. Right? I've not heard it. I have never been traveling with someone who misses their exit and in frustration says, Confucius, I missed my turn. Right? Like you don't hear that. I've not heard that. Because even in our frustration and even in people that don't even associate with the church or Jesus, they know the name that's at the top. The reason we never heard those names is because Jesus is always the name. You see, Jesus sits at the top because there is power that is in his name. And when you and I, when we misuse his name, Jesus is trivialized just down to our human emotion. God desires for his name and our words to be used to show people the power and the character of who he is. And when we misuse his name, when we abuse his name, when we use his name for our personal gain, then it does not build his character up to others. It just tears us down. Paul gives credence to this in Ephesians as he's writing this letter to the church in Ephesus. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, he says this, Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that they may benefit those who listen. I want to read that one more time. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. I want you to take just a minute and think over this past week. Think about the conversations that you had with people. Think about the conversations that you had at work or about people at work. I want you to think about conversations that you had with your spouse, about neighbors, or even people at the church. And now I want you to use I want us to use this verse as a filter of those conversations. Asking ourselves three questions. Number one, was it wholesome? Was it wholesome? And number two, looking at those conversations, did it build someone else up? And number three, did it benefit those who listen? In other words, the people that I was talking to, did they walk away and encouraged? And if the person that I was talking about, if they were standing right here in this circle, would they be encouraged and built up by the conversation I had as well? how would our conversations change? How would our conversations change? And because of the world we live in, I'm going to take it one step further. How would our vocal conversations change? And how would our social media interaction change if we use this verse as a filter? How would our conversation about politics change if we use this verse as a filter? You know what I think? I think that we would live in a quiet society. If this verse was our filter for everything that was said, we would live in a quiet society, and I think Facebook would be begging for updates because no one would be saying anything. But when it comes to the words that we use, when it comes to the power of the words that we use, our words should build the character and the name of God up for others around us to see. What would it look like if our filter was, is it wholesome? Is it helpful for building others up? And does it benefit those who listen to this conversation? How would your words change? How would my words change? But instead of using the power that is in our words, I'm afraid that too often we abuse God's name. Have you ever had anybody tell you, God told me? Like start a sentence with that. God told me. And I'm not here this morning to tell you that all of those times are not true. Okay? Please get me when I say that. But I'm afraid that too many times, especially in the church world, we use the phrase God told me as a crutch just to perpetuate our opinion and our emotions instead of what God really wants. Because the phrase God told me is sacred. But too often, it loses that. And we just try to sell what we want on the platform of what because God gave us his word. God did tell us. And there's a lot of times where I've heard someone say, God told me, and it contradicts what's in here. And I think to myself, really? God told you that? Because that's not what it says in here. And this is written down. And we abuse the name of God to push forward our opinion. When I was in college, there was a guy that lived on the floor below us. We had a curfew at the college I went to. We had to be in the dorms at a certain time. We had to stay there. And it was the middle of the night, and we heard some commotion, and there was like police lights outside. And I didn't know what was going on, so I just stayed upstairs. And but the next day, I asked questions. I said, hey, what was going on? Well, come to find out, this guy, okay, who lived on the floor below us, okay, at 2:30 in the morning, okay, he decided that he would go for a walk outside. Now, there was a creek that ran behind the college that I went to, and it was 2:30 in the morning, and the security guard at our campus, he was driving around, and he finds this guy walking across campus barefoot, heading down to the creek. And so I asked him a little bit later, I said, where are you going? And what did he say to me? God told me I was supposed to go to the creek and not to wear shoes and to watch out for sticks. Listen, it could have happened. But my first question was, were you sleepwalking? And did you eat Taco Bell late? Like, what's speaking here? It could have been. But then I asked him, I said, when did he tell you that? Oh, I'm not sure. Listen, if God's telling me something, I'm going to know where he's telling me. You know, like, oh, okay, got it. You see, if we're not careful, we can use the name of God to benefit ourselves or our purpose. Now, let me bring it a little bit closer to home. If you're a parent in the room, hey, if you're a parent in the room and you talk condescending to your kids, if you talk down at them, if you tear them down with your words, if they are your personal slave, I mean, to an extent where you're not teaching them, you know, and you're just making them do everything. And if you are pushing constant pressure on them to perform and do these things and then talking down when they don't match up, and then if your children ask you about this and you respond with, well, the Bible tells you to honor your mom and dad, and so that's what you're supposed to do. That's what God says. You're misusing and taking God's name in vain for your benefit. if we're not training our kids in the way of the Lord, if we're not teaching them the way, if we're just talking down at them to degrade them and pull them down so we feel better, we are misusing God's name for our benefit. Husbands in the room, if you talk down at your wife, if you use words that demean her and you're condescending to her, if you tear her down, if you make her feel insecure all the time with your words, if you have a list of things that she's supposed to do, and if she doesn't do those, then you tear her down for those things. And if she approaches you about it and you say, well, in the Bible it says that wives are supposed to submit to their husbands because I'm the head of the house. First of all, if you're alive after that conversation, okay, I wouldn't be. I'd be dead. Okay, someone else is preaching next week. But if that's your response to your wife, then you are misusing the powerful name and instruction of God for your personal gain. Because the Bible also tells you to be the leader of your house and to love your wife as you love the church. And so you are misusing the power of God. You are misusing the name for your personal benefit. Maybe you've seen on TV, to see God work in your life, or you've got a piece of mail, to see God work in your life, donate to. It's like, I don't know, I've seen God work in a lot of ways, and I've never mailed that back. Hey, if we are using God's name for our personal benefit, then we are misusing his name and the power that is in his words. In other words, our truth is this for this morning. When we discredit God's name, we destroy and denounce the appearance of his character around us. When we discredit God's name, we destroy and denounce his character for those around us. James reminds us. He reminds us of the power in our words. He reminds us of the power of the tongue. And in James chapter 3, beginning verse 9, he says, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth we praise and curse. Come praise and cursing. Hear this. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. It should not be that one conversation we're tearing people down and the next conversation we're talking about what we sang in worship. It should not be that we are building the character of God up in one conversation and we are absolutely dismantling someone else in the church with our words in the next. It should not be. When we discredit the name of God, we destroy and denounce the perception of his character for those around us. When we misuse the name of God in our words to benefit us, we destroy and denounce the perception of the character of God around us. Because God desires for you and I to use our words and to use the power that is found in his name to build his character up for those around us. That way, when they hear the things that we say, it will just give credence to what they would read about and hear. A couple weeks ago, I was in the car with Reagan. It was just the two of us. And I was talking to my mom on the speakerphone. And my mom had foot surgery a couple weeks ago, and so I was asking her how that was going and recovery and everything like that. And she can't put any weight on it for 2 weeks. And so she's telling us about this, and then she tells us, she said, yeah, I can't put any weight on it for 2 weeks. I just have to stay where I'm at in one spot. And before I can react, Reagan in the back seat says out loud, she says, oh, that stinks. But she did not say those words. And it caught me completely off guard. And I looked up in the rearview mirror, and it wasn't like the dad death stare. It wasn't that. It was the dad like, what just happened? You know, and so I look up in the rearview, and she knew right away. Like, I don't even think she was done saying it, and she realized. And I look in the rearview mirror, and she's like, I'm sorry. And my mom on the phone, she says, what'd she say? I'm like, oh, nothing, don't worry about it, Mom. So how's things going? You're like, I'm not that bad of a parent, you know? Like, And so we just kind of moved on. And so we finished having this conversation with my mom, and I hang up the phone, and Reagan goes, "Dad, I'm really sorry I said that." And I looked in the rearview mirror because I'm still driving, and I said, "Reagan, it's okay." I said, why did you choose to say that?" And in a very honest and candid response, she just said, "Dad," she said, "I just hear it all the time at school. And I just said it without even thinking or realizing I was doing it." And as a parent, I'm kind of at a fork in the road of, do I, just correct, or do I teach through it? And so I went with the teacher out on this one. And I said, "Reagan," I said, I'm really thankful that you're honest about it. I said, "I know that you're sorry, and I know that you know it was wrong." And I said, "Here's the thing." I said, "That's never going to change, no matter how old you get." And then she asked me, she said, "Well, Dad, how do I not do it?" I looked back at her, and I said, "Reagan, you have to make the choice to not use those words." I said, "You're the one who can choose to say that or not say that." And one of the last things I said to her, I said, "Reagan," I said, "we don't use those words because God doesn't like when we use those words." You see, friends, you and I, we're faced with a choice. How do we use our words? Do we use the name of God to find power and authority and hope in our lives? Do we use the name of God to find forgiveness and perseverance moving forward? Do our words build that character up of His name, or do our words tear others down? If we look back at some of our more recent conversations, would we say that, yeah, that builds the character of God up for others around? Or would we say, no, those words actually destroyed the perception of God's character? No, if my coworker was actually in my office when I was saying those things, they would have left absolutely beaten down. If my spouse heard what I said about them, how are we using our words? Because we're faced with a choice that God gives us to either use our words to build up His character and the power of His name for those around us, or to tear others down. How are we using our words? God gives us this, what seems really harsh, second sentence here. It says that if you do this, you will not be found guiltless. Like, if you take my name in vain, put a period. Like, that's it. You will not be found guiltless. And when I read that, it makes me so incredibly thankful for Jesus. Because we can turn the pages and we can see that this timeless truth finds grace a little bit later. Because Jesus, when He came to this world, it says that He did not come to abolish and get rid of these truths, the law, but He came to fulfill it. And because of what Jesus did on a cross and in a grave, you and I today, even though we know our conversations and the way that we've used God's name have not been to build His character up for others, but because of Jesus, we have a second chance at this. Because of Jesus, we can be found guiltless. Because of Jesus, you and I, God can look at us, and even though we've misused our words and misused His name and not stepped into the power of who He is with our words, because of Jesus, He can look at us and see the blood of His Son and not our misused words. How are we using our words? Are we using our words to discredit God or to build His character up for others to see? Why don't we go and stand together? We're going to worship together and we're going to sing. The very thing, there's a song that kind of just echoes everything that we just talked about. It's the song that we're going to sing. This name of Yahweh God that holds power, that moves mountains, that splits seas, that heals blind men. It's the power that is found in this name that we cry out, that we shout, that brings hope to our life, that brings freedom to our life, that brings forgiveness to our life, that gives hope with our words. It's the name of Yahweh God that we find power that can move the struggles of our life, that can carry the heavy burdens and the struggles of this world. It's the name. It's the words that we echo that speaks to the power of God. As we worship, maybe some of us, we look at this past week and we say, the words that I have said or the comments that I've made or the things that I posted and typed, they tear down, they discredit God's name. And so maybe where we're at, it's God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry my words have torn down instead of build your character up. I am sorry that I've discredited your name. I'm sorry that because of my words over this past week, there are people that see less of your character because of my conversation. Maybe this morning as we worship, it's God, remind me of the power that's in your name. Remind me of the freedom and the hope that's in your name. Remind me of the power when difficulty comes, that I can speak your name and the demons can flee. There's power that's in our name. There's power that's in his name. How are we using our words to build that character up in us and those around us? Let's worship together.